How you doing? Welcome to my second episode. Today I want to cover a topic that's a little bit more controversial in nature. I'm gonna take these off. I want to talk about the act of being offended, and I want to point out an observation that I've made over the years. So I'm going to start by asking you this. Do you think that being offended ought to be a little more difficult? You know what I mean? Have you noticed these days that, especially in specific groups regarding perhaps race or genders, the people that get offended under those subjects, aren't they a little tad easily offended? Like they're jumping at the opportunity as opposed to avoiding it like you'd think a person would. And then it occurred to me that people are proactively being offended as opposed to being offended via a legitimate trigger. And by that, what I mean is that they're choosing to be offended. They're the ones pulling their own trigger. You know, they're not being triggered by an external source. They themselves are doing the trigger pulling. And that's not good, is it? You know what I mean? Now, you can be one of these people that is easily offended, or maybe you know somebody who is. Either way, the point of this video is to sort of call out the difference so that you understand the difference. If you're one of the people who gets easily offended, then maybe you can benefit from this. It would help you, as opposed to being offended, right? Because being offended is supposed to be a bad thing. It's supposed to be a trigger of negative emotions, and it's supposed to be triggered by an external source. Think of the word offended, offense. It is a response to an offense being made. So if a person is so easily offended, it's like they're choosing what counts as an offense and what doesn't. And that may not be that fair to the person who quote unquote may have caused it, who is not trying to offend anybody. You know what I mean? Like, in the act of being offended, it would be better to let there be a trigger and let it get there when it does. As opposed to looking for it. You know what I mean? Because I'm saying this because I've come to notice that there's a difference in intention between the person who is legitimately offended by an outside trigger, a source that is actively seeking to offend, and then the person who is just offended out of a whim, like they just choose it, even though that wasn't the intended outcome. It just became the outcome, but nobody was looking to do it. And that difference in intent is that, like, if a person is really under a legitimate offense, they are trying to defend themselves, because that's the counterpart. That's the countermand of offense, is defense, right? An offense is made, and so a defensive countermeasure kind of arises from that, as because you're just trying to defend yourself. This is good. But if it gets to the point where you're being offended so easily and at the slightest things, is the offense not coming from you? Because you're the one who chose to be triggered, and that's not very good. You know what I mean? Because once a person goes into the frenzy of being offended, problems can no longer be solved, because they are inside an emotional state that prevents the ability to really look at the problem logically, because there's too much emotion in the way. And that's when you realize that a lot of these people who are getting easily offended, there's a dishonesty to it. Because one of the things that people like to get offended about, especially when it's a really touchy subject, and the reason behind it is really to A, call attention to themselves. B, they make a scene. The people who trigger themselves, you'll notice they always make a scene. They're not just defending themselves. They need everybody to know. Because those kind of people, when they get offended, it's usually about a very popular topic. And so they are getting offended because they want to point out a very unpopular opinion that has been made. And they want to make a scene. They want those around them to know that they are pointing out that unpopular opinion as sort of as to say, I would not agree with it. I would do the more popular thing, therefore I'm the better person. So they're calling attention to themselves and they're trying to win brownie points with their peers. So they're not really offended by its traditional meaning. They've changed the meaning. And this is the difference between being properly offended and being offended proactively. That's the issue. The issue is in those who are offended proactively. They seek it out. They don't avoid it. And that will be the normal thing to do, to avoid it, because people don't want to be offended. It sucks. Once you're offended, legitimately, you have an issue that you have to deal with because an offense is made and you have to put up a defense. You know what I mean? The proactively offended, they don't do that. They seek out to be offended because they want to make a scene. They want to try and make themselves out to be better by pointing out something that they feel is unpopular and making everyone know around them that they're going to go with the popular thing against that opinion so that they can seem like saints or something. Like, you got to understand, once you choose to be triggered, by choice, the only thing people know is that you are offended. You know what I mean? The subject that you're talking about barely even matters, because the only thing that they're fronted with is the emotion, not the logic. So even if what you're saying makes sense, the other person will go against your sense. They'll try to prove you wrong, even if they know it's not possible, because they don't care about being wrong or right. They just know that you are offended, and therefore, because you're doing it proactively, the source of offense is actually coming from you, and they're just defending themselves. That's all it is. The topic it becomes irrelevant as one person gets increasingly angry at the other person about so-and-so touchy subject, that it just becomes a free-for-all, and everyone's after blood. And because everyone's after blood, it's never going to end. Because once people are after blood, once they are emotionally reacting, they're never going to look at logic. Which is very odd, because if you think about how most arguments are, you'll notice that in almost every argument, both parties are right. And that's where it becomes a cycle, because no one's wrong. They're just trying to outshine their point, and they both have valid points. But they don't realize that there's no wrong to point out, because party A is right, party B is right. No one's wrong. So who are you trying to say that is wrong? And because of that, it doesn't end, because no one's wrong. So they're just trying to outshine their point, trying to say that their point matters more. And because of that, no conclusion is ever reached. So that's what this small lecture I'm giving you. I want it to be about that. And I want people to learn the difference between being offended legitimately under the realization that there is an outside offense headed your way, and then being offended by choice, by being easily triggered and making these huge emotional reactions. And you end up learning later that, well, that's the only thing the other party's going to see is the emotional reaction, So it's just emotion versus emotion. Which one do you want to be? Do you want to be offended for a legit reason? Or do you want to overreact? Because if you overreact, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. people are just going to go in defense mode against you. And that's not good, is it? So use this video as a starting point to learn the difference between traditional offense versus self-imposed offense. Okay? Because once you learn the difference between the two, it becomes so easy to spot it in others. And once that happens, you know when to walk away. Because once a person comes up to you with their offense, without realizing that they are the source, why argue with those people? You can't win one way or another, because they don't care about being happy. They just care about being right, and they don't understand that by being proactively offended, they've put themselves in a position where they can't have both. It's happy or right. So go ahead and show this video to anyone you think might need to see it. And if you're inclined, give it a like and subscribe to try and spread the message. Help as many people as we can, regardless of which side you're on.